Dobar dan, poštovani gledaoci. Gost SRNA danas je Ido Netanjahu, izraelski pisac. Mr. Netanjahu, welcome to Republika Srpska News Agency, and thank you very much.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you very much
for speaking to us. Mr. Netanjahu, this evening in Banja Luka is the promotion of your novel, Itamar K. The book has drawn great attention because it talks about freedom of expression and conflict between artists and, as I understand it, cultural establishment. What inspired you to write it, and is it based on personal experiences?
It is based, it's not a, no, of course personal experiences, actually those experiences happened to me more after I wrote the book than before I wrote the book, in terms of the cultural, the way the establishment pounces on people who think differently. But it's a phenomenon that is widespread in Israel. It was why I wrote this book 28 years ago. There has been a constant hold ever since the establishment of the State of Israel on the various platforms of expression, whether it is the media, whether it is cultural expressions such as theater or movies, and certainly on the academia. There's been a stranglehold by, for better word, the left on these matters. And I felt it was very important to talk about it, to expose it, to give the story of a person who does not follow the typical tract of Israeli artists who go into the mainstream in order to be accepted. Okay, so I thought it was. I wrote the novel because of what I was seeing around me. As a kind of protest, I guess, but not necessarily because of personal experience, not necessarily. Afterwards, things I describe in the novel that happened to the hero of the novel happened to me, okay, but not before.
You wrote the book 28 years ago, but
yes.
Now it has been translated to Serbian. How did that come to be, and how important is that to you that now readers in Republika Srpska have this book in their language?
I think it's very important because what happened is that Europe has followed the pattern that existed in Israel before, the pattern of cancel culture, which the word did not exist when I wrote the book, but this is a lot of it is what the book is about. So the things that I describe in the book about the stranglehold that the establishment has on the forms of expression, that is something that has slowly become worse and worse and worse in Europe, as well as in the United States. And which is why it's created an interest, which is why it was some years ago, all of a sudden translated into Italian, because the people there felt that there's a need to talk about these things, which is why it was then translated into German, okay, only 2 years ago, which is why it's now translated into Serbian. It's something obviously that discusses, or not discusses because it's not a documentary book, it's a book of literature, but describes situations that happen, are very common nowadays, and I think that's what they appeal. It was originally translated from Hebrew into Russian by an Israeli-Russian immigrant, immigrated from Russia to Israel. And it appealed to him very much, as it appealed to many, many Russian immigrants to Israel. Because to them, they said, yes, this is the kind of stranglehold that the that in the Soviet Union, the government had on us, not allowing us free speech. So they felt an affinity to what is being described in the book. Of course, in the book, it's not the government. It's another form, a more, I would say, a more sinister form of power that envelops the society, more sinister than that of the government forcing its views upon the people.
How do you view censorship today? Is it maybe more hidden than before?
Completely.
But even,
Yeah,
but is it dangerous? Maybe even more dangerous.
It's more dangerous in the sense that some people don't realize that this is what's happening to them. That is, they cannot say certain things. They cannot say even certain words sometimes. If we go back to the example of the Soviet Union, people knew, okay, this is what the government tells me. I don't believe them. They're all liars. They looked at the newspaper. This is the government. That's what the government writes. Okay, so they had a sort of inner freedom that they naturally possessed. In Western society, this is more, as I said, it's more sinister because it's not so easy to discern. All of a sudden, you cannot say certain things. You cannot express certain expressions because you're ostracized by the media attacks you. You're being ostracized sometimes by your peers. So it's much more debilitating, I would say, for human freedom than the other direct form of censorship. It's not even censorship. You're really pounded all the time into thinking certain things. Take, for example, the craziness of the transgender movement to me as a physician, I'm also, besides being a writer, I'm also a physician. To me, what they were doing in America and in some of your Western countries, the surgeries on the children, okay, to change their sex, supposedly change their sex, cutting off body parts. To me, this was the horrible form of some primitive kind of torture. But this, you cannot say anything against it. Not allowed to say anything against it. If you say anything against it, you're banished. That's it. Some people lost their jobs. Some doctors in America lost their jobs because they were expressing views against it. And this did not come from the government. This is once again the same thing, the pervasive, that you have to conform, the conformity to what certain people prescribe. So this is the things that I didn't even imagine when I wrote the book in 1998. I didn't even imagine such a thing could happen, but it did.
But the main character, Itamar Kohler, deals with censorship in some way in your book, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, this kind of censorship. Once again,
Yeah.
when we usually say censorship, I remember as a child there was a government censor, and you could not, if you say certain things about the army, in a letter or something, they would erase it. If you wrote a letter from the army, the censor would always open the letters, and they would erase things that they thought were secret. That to me is censorship. Okay, government-imposed censorship. This is a different type of censorship, a more subtle type of censorship that I think is very ominous, and this is what I try to expose in the book, and I think it's probably the first book that I know also to expose the great degree of how these people are also hypocrites. That is, they talk about freedom of expression, they talk about how wonderful they are, they talk about different forms of art, that they allow everything, they're pluralistic, but really they're not, okay? They want only their type of thinking, their type of art to be expressed. And this is also something that I showed. And I showed also in the book, I tried to go into the fact that this also, this type of really political views, forcing political views upon art, degrades the level of art. The artist that I bring here in this book, I mean, it's a satire, so a lot of funny things, but I don't show them as people who don't have talent. They're talented people, but their art becomes degraded more and more and more by the fact that they have to conform to what is expected of them. And so they become really, instead of being true artists, they become politicians of sorts. And that was also something that is in the book. It's parcel of the whole, I would say, painting that I paint in the novel.
Is then, in your view, courage and that type of moral courage necessary for true art?
True art cannot exist without courage. If you lose the courage, and some artists lose courage, if the courage is the courage to really say what you feel and what you think. If you try to cater to what you think people will want you to say, you've already lost the courage to say what you think, because it can be very dangerous to say the truth, okay? To express the truth. And of course, when I published my novel, I was hammered right and left by very bad, not so much a review of actually there was a very, even in the most leftist newspaper in Israel, Haaretz, there was a glowing review that was published of the novel, as a novel. But afterwards, personal attacks came. Severe attacks came in the press against me because of this novel. If an artist cannot take this kind of attacks and succumbs to what he thinks those in the know that they want him to write, then he's not a true artist. Yes, courage is necessary for art, any form of art, whether you're a painter, whether you're a filmmaker, whether you're a novelist, whether you're a playwright, whether you're a director of plays. You don't want to conform. Conformity is the enemy of art.
Mr. Netanyahu, if you don't mind, I would like to ask some wider political and geopolitical social questions.
Okay, what a surprise, okay. Yeah. That's fine, of course.
Yeah. Israel, maybe our audience doesn't know, but your brother is the Prime Minister of Israel.
For many years, yes.
For many years, yeah. Israel often, maybe always, faces security, political challenges, but still manages to stay strong and united. What lessons could small nations like the Serbs in Republika Srpska learn from Israel?
I would say the one factor that is most important is a sense of shared identity, which we can call nationalism. Nationalism got a bad name after World War II because of the Nazis. But that was pathological nationalism. Any ideology can be normal or it can be pathological. They took it to an extreme, which was horrible. But nationalism should not have a bad name. Nationalism is an almost precondition for human freedom in societies, because it allows the people to determine what happens to them. When it's determined from above, it's no longer democracy. It's something else. So it's no longer freedom. Now the Jewish people have had a sense of being a nation, probably the oldest in the world, okay? The sense of your own identity as a people was very strong in ancient times among the Jews and remained that way even though we didn't have a country. We were kicked out of our country, we left the country, but we maintained our national identity throughout the centuries. Now, in modern times, there were certain Jewish groups that identity sort of dissipated. But it was inside us, it was strong enough to allow the idea of Zionism. Once Herzl, the founder of Zionism, whose father, by the way, is Serbian, okay? I don't know if people know that. Although he was born in Hungary and then spent his time mostly in Austria. Once he came out with the idea of returning to the land of Israel and how to do it, all of a sudden all those Jews who were dormant yearned for it, okay, because the sense of nationalism was so strong. And that is exactly what also happened on October 7. the Arabs, the Palestinians, the terrorists, all of Gaza actually, they were sure that we were quarreling among ourselves. There were demonstrations in the streets of Israel, had to do with political matters. We won't get into that. And they were sure this is the ideal time. And they heard some people say that they will not serve anymore in the army with this kind of government. They thought this is the ideal time to strike. We can strike, and with the help of Lebanon, the help of Iran, Israel can be liquidated. They misunderstood the Jewish people. They misunderstood the Jewish mind. And on October 7, even though the army was not prepared, young people drove all the way by themselves. They had a gun at home. They took their gun, they took their weapons, whatever they had. They went to fight around the Gaza Strip to save the citizens that were being slaughtered. And this was done by just people who volunteered. Okay, I met a person who had been serving in the army, and he was called to his unit on that morning to Jerusalem. And he told his commander, "I'm sorry, I'm not coming to the unit. I'm going to the Gaza Strip to fight." Because they wanted to save the people, because they felt Israel was under threat. So all those that were protesting against the government a day before, they all came together. And this is the greatness of Israel society, the desire to live as a nation. Okay. And this is, I think, from what I've seen here at least, in Srpskog, this is an underlying feeling that the people here have, which is, to me, it's crucial for the survival. Now, what do you do with that? Whether, of course, in order to survive, you have to have also the courage to fight, if necessary, which you did. You showed it. And that's why you have your own autonomous region, and you wouldn't have it otherwise. So I'm not sure you have to learn from us, okay? I think the world has to learn from you.
Yeah, but we do share some similarities through history,
yeah,
especially World War II.
Sure.
Yeah, so in that sense, how do you view that connection? Do we have some similarities? We survived, kept our dignity, and will to survive.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you see some cultural connections with?
I don't know enough about the culture of the Serbian people to tell you that. I just know that we had two famous generals who were the head of the army, one after the other. I served when I was a soldier in the army many years ago. The chiefs of staff of the army were from Yugoslavia, okay, including the commander of the army in the Yom Kippur War, V.D.direktora. He was from here, okay. He was a Serbian Jew. So there is, of course, a shared history, and we know about what you did. More or less, almost the only nation that under Nazi rule was actively fighting against them, and sacrificing a tremendous amount of lives. We all know that. And so we admire the Serbian people for that. As maybe you admire us, but we also admire you. I personally felt an admiration when it was, whatever it was, 30 years ago, I forget what, when I saw how you were struggling to maintain your national identity. I was very happy when it was suggested that this book be translated to Serbian, because I personally felt an affinity for the Serbian people.
Republika Srpska now wishes to develop a stronger relationship with Israel in all aspects, economical,
yeah,
cultural. Do you see? How do you see that potential?
I think it's very important that those countries that are trying to buck the trend that is the trend of transnationalism and erasing nationalities, such as the European Union, such as what happened in America before, now it's changing, to acquiesce to desire both of the left, who are joining forces with the Muslims who are in the West, the radical Muslims, to erase national identity, and that is what's joining them together. The strange alignment of the progressive forces in the West with the Muslims. What do they have to do with each other? Well, the main thing is both of them hate Western ideology, with the Western idea, and hate the idea of nationalism, because Muslim ideology is, of course, transnational. Everything should be subjugated to the Muslim ideology, the Muslim religion. There should be a world caliphate, whether it's Shiite or whether it's Sunni, a world domination, that the nations are no longer of any importance. And so all these nations that feel that they want to maintain their identity should come together. And those nations that are actively opposing this trend, such as Hungary, such as Serbia, such as Srpska, and other nations, not many, okay, but I think there will be. I think there's a reaction in many nations. I think they should join forces together.
And how important is culture and art in preserving all this, in preserving our national identity?
I think part of your national identity is, of course, your culture. This is what holds of course, every culture is influenced by other cultures. In order to for culture to progress, you cannot I would say, put a barrier to the influence of foreign cultures, which is what some nations are doing, which is what the Arabs in many cases are doing. That is, they're exposed, have been exposed for 1,500 years to Western culture, but they only take the surface of the culture. They're not influenced by more deeply, unfortunately, by Western culture. So yes, each separate culture, of course, is influenced. You cannot avoid it, and it's not a good thing to avoid. But each should maintain its own separate identity. And what is, I think, often happening now in the Western world is that this distinct identity is being crumbled. There's too much imbibement of this, I would say, overall American influenced, if you want to say, culture that is depressing other cultures. So it's very important for us to maintain our separate cultures. It's very important to us to maintain, of course, the languages, okay, our separate languages, and to have a distinct voice. So culture and the sense of national identity are connected together, which does not mean you don't want to be exposed to other cultures. You do want to be exposed, because another culture might have something to say that you might think is good, and you want to take it upon you.
What other advice could you give smaller nations, how to help them keep their freedom and national identity?
Look, right now, the great struggle, and we cannot ignore it, is the struggle between radical Muslim forces. Once again, whether it's Sunni, whether it's Shiite, trying to overtake the world. We just now are about to finish a war that Israel fought, I think, very bravely against both forces, against the radical Muslim Brotherhood, whose ideology is not only to kill every Jew, but to kill the Christians. This is the Muslim Brotherhood ideology. The Christian and the Jew have to submit. If they do not submit, they have to be killed. Certainly the Jews have to be killed. And this is the ideology, and this is the ideology of Hamas, of course. They're part of the Muslim Brotherhood. Yet this is the Hamas that in the streets of all the cities of Europe, in all the capitals, whether in America, whether in Europe, whether in London, whether in everywhere, they carry Hamas flag. We have to understand this. We have to work against this. We have to counter this trend in the West that embraces this ideology, maybe without understanding what this ideology says. Same thing about Iran. Why Iran, that was developing nuclear weapons and developing ballistic missiles, not just to shoot them in Israel. They were developing ballistic missiles that would have a range of thousands of kilometers, not against Israel. Israel is not that far away from them. This is in order to rain atomic weapons, the ability to rain atomic weapons in the cities of Europe and in America. They would have been a great power had they had an atomic bomb, and they were about to get the atomic bomb within maybe 2 or 3 months from the time that we destroyed their infrastructure for making a bomb. Now, why should a tiny country like Israel be the one to do this? The Chancellor of Germany, Merz, admitted, he said, Israel did the dirty job for us. He was referring to Iran and what we did with the Iranian nuclear program. But he did not say we're to blame for us not doing it. Why should a tiny country like Israel do it and not a big country like Germany? If he thinks that this is a threat to Germany. So it's really a matter of courage. In order to maintain your existence even in the struggle, and the struggle is not going to go away, you have to have courage, and to show the kind of courage that Israeli people have shown to the world in the last 2 years. Despite the protests, despite everything, we did what needed to be done in order to save ourselves. But this struggle is not over. And certainly in Europe it is not over. We see the migration, we see the radical forces taking over the Muslim communities in Europe, which is always, that's what happens. I mean, not all the Palestinian Arabs were against Zionism. Some of them embraced us when the Jews started moving into the land of Israel. The local Arabs, many of them embraced us, but the radicals took over. And they turned things around, and now all the Palestinians hate the very existence of the Jews in the country. And this same radicalization is inevitable in Europe unless the leaders of Europe take decisive action against the radicals who are trying to activate the Muslim community to be aggressive. What happened in the land of Israel was that the British ruled the country, okay? And they were very happy that the Arabs are acting against the Jews because they did not want a Jewish state. Initially they had the Balfour Declaration in 1917, but then they backed off. So they ruled the country, they thought the British Empire needs the country, they didn't want an independent Jewish state, and they were very happy to have the Arabs become more and more radicalized. So they did nothing against the radical forces. And the end result of what we see is what's happening today, both in the Middle East, but also in Europe.
Mr. Netanjahu, thank you very much for this conversation.
Thank you for having me. Thanks.